Yeah, an hour. Yeah. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our very interesting talk, Conversations Beyond Band, Baja, and Baraat, Family Edition. I'm Maryam Suheyl, and I'm a marriage and family therapist, as you can see. And I see those conversations beyond the celebrations in my office every day. That's my bread and butter. So I thought today, why not share some of the insights from those conversations with all of you? And today we are joined with two really esteemed guests and very relevant speakers on this topic, Tanya Imran and Omar Tauseef. Tanya, as you all know, is a founder of Ask the Village community, and she's also founder of the blog, The Average Mommy. Omar Tauseef here is a psychotherapist and a very, very old and dear friend. Omar and I have been working together for almost 10 years at this point, and this journey has been very interesting. We have also shared our insights. We have shared cases. We have seen people go through, the transition um, into marriage, into parenthood. So I thought it would be very interesting to hear from the two of you today. So thank you so much for joining us. And we cannot see Tanya today due to some technical difficulties, so I'm really sorry about that. At some point, probably Tanya will come back in the video. But Tanya, can you hear us? Okay, great, great. And this talk, this seminar is brought to you by Saya Health. They are a company that uses technology to increase access to mental health. They have programs for employee assistance and also for school counseling. They are generally very, very active in spreading awareness on these topics, and I'm very fond of their work in general. So thank you, Saya, for providing this opportunity. It looks like we lost Tanya just now. Omar, do you see her?
Not on my screen. No, I don't.
Oh, all right. So probably she'll join back in a minute. So why don't we start with you, Umar?
Hmm.
As I said, I'm sure ये जो conversations रोज मैं अपने ऑफिस में
Mm.
सुनती हूँ शादी के बाद क्या होता है शादी तक तो सबको पता है कि बहुत सेलिब्रेशन होती है कपड़े बनते हैं हनीमून की तैयारियां होती हैं बट समटाइम्स हनीमून से ही या शादी के स्टेज से ही
Mhm.
फंक्शन से ही मसाइल शुरू हो जाते हैं और जो आपने सोचा नहीं होता उस तरफ आपकी जिंदगी का रुख मुड़ना शुरू हो जाता है राइट सो व्हाट इन योर एक्सपीरियंस जनरली क्या स्ट्रगल्स होती हैं राइट आफ्टर यू गेट मैरिड इन योर एक्सपीरियंस रादर
I think that's, if you think about it, that's the media portrayal of a relationship as well, which is that whether it's the Disney books or whether it's any rom-com, basically the ending is the happily ever after, after the entire conflict. All the villains who come in, all the people who were standing in the way of the happy couple, and all the challenges and the wars that happen in between coming in their coming together, it all ends with a happily ever after. And it we get that impression कि दो लोगों का इकट्ठा होना ज्यादा मुश्किल काम है, but it seems like दो लोगों का उस चीज के बाद इकट्ठा रहना ज्यादा मुश्किल काम है, whereas there
दैट्स
are
ट्रू
there is very little that people understand about it. That's why I think for you and me as well, a lot of times we are working with those people who are just surprised that they thought that we have even couples who have known each other for many months, years, or who have married out of love or understanding or knowing that there's enough similarity and their understanding with each other, and hence they were getting married, and then they are in coming in for support to you, and then you're sending one of them to me that okay, well, this person has a lot of their stuff that probably is coming up with them. And I think that's where there might be even some social expectations that are set, what people assume a marriage is meant to be, and then when they experience it, it seems to be a different thing altogether, and that baffles people.
Yeah. So, what do you think is the expectation generally of a marriage, societal or वो couple
Hmm.
जो individuals उसमें जाते हैं वो क्या सोच के जाते हैं? What is that going to be like?
I think that there's a lot of if you think about it, the band Baja Baraat is setting the stage for this, that this is how life is meant to be. It's that very
That's right.
big happy union between people. All the fireworks will go in the bedroom as well as outside of the bedroom, and everything is going to be happy. And life doesn't look like that way. Relationships don't match up to that expectation. We have all grown up with movies of how people have a lot of that resonance with each other, and that's that expectation. And eventually, if you think about it, हमारे culture में, whether those are traditional marriages or non-traditional marriages, there's so much that we are trying to bring people together. जात एक हो, social class एक हो, education एक हो, शक्ल पसंद आती हो, सारा कुछ हो, सब कुछ उसके बाद भी अगर दोनों की ना बन रही हो, I think that somewhere there is an expectation that we are meant to get along, and there's not going to be conflict, and we will move along happily ever after. And uh, but more often than not, that is not how it looks like. I think that the moment people start even disagreeing over the first series of factors, that okay, well, are we going to meet your parents or not, are we going to do this or not, my mother expects you to do this, your mother expects me to do this, and no one has ever talked to anyone about what to do in such matters.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree. Tanya, are you back here with us?
I think if this doesn't work out, I'll just let you two go ahead with it instead of wasting everybody's time.
We
No,
can
no,
hear
come
you
on, let's
now.
try once more. We can hear you now. Yeah, yeah. So Tanya,
Okay.
Umar was talking about how this celebration just sets the stage for the rest of the relationship, and there's this societal expectation कि आगे भी कभी कॉन्फ्लिक्ट नहीं आएगा और जो विलेन और जो कुछ भी होना था वो शादी से पहले हो गया बट आई थिंक इन योर एक्सपीरियंस आपके पास बहुत रॉ डेटा आता है बहुत सारी खवातीन का वो अपनी स्टोरी शेयर करती हैं दे हैव अ ट्रस्ट इन योर ग्रुप दे फील सेफ विद यू इन योर ग्रुप इन योर कम्युनिटी सो आपके एक्सपीरियंस में शादी के बाद किस तरह के विलन्स आते हैं शादी के पहले वाले तो हमें थोड़े अंदाजे हैं ना किस तरह के विलन्स शादी के बाद आती हैं किस तरह की स्ट्रगल्स आती हैं Tanya, your voice is breaking up. Could you turn your camera off if that would help? Yes. Okay. Could you say something now, please? Where can you hear her?
No, I can't hear Tanya.
Tanya, I'm so sorry. I don't think we can hear you. Okay, Omar, so I'll just pose the same question to you. कि
Uh-huh.
शादी के बाद वाले कौन से विलेन होते हैं शादी के पहले वाले
I
तो
think,
हमें कुछ अंदाजा
Maryam,
होता है
before we started this session, Tanya had shared some insights and some examples.
हाँ
So why don't we bring those in? I'm forgetting. I think she had shared a
yeah
particular example. If you can remember, maybe we can start off from that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, she was just saying that generally a lot of women get disgruntled कि जी शादी से पहले तो इतनी
Mm.
अटेंशन मिलती थी और शादी के बाद
Yeah.
मेरा मियाँ अब जो है वो काम में बहुत ज्यादा इन्वॉल्व हो
Yeah,
गया है
that's what
उसने
she was
जॉब
saying.
चेंज की
Mm.
है और अपने कॉलीग्स के साथ ही he has a great time so I
Yeah.
think कुछ वो expectation शादी से पहले और शादी के बाद की मैच
Mm.
नहीं करती in terms of even their union कि जिस तरह की वो
Yeah.
पहले एंगेजमेंट रखते थे और उसके बाद क्या होता है
Hmm. I think इसमें दो या तीन बातें हैं which probably could be things we can explore further. One is that I think in our culture I don't entirely subscribe to that dichotomy. लेकिन जो एक sense होता है कि या communitarian cultures होते हैं या बहुत individualistic cultures होते हैं, in our part of the world the focus is more on the group. So we're not really from a very young age encouraged to think in terms of you, because you is more selfish. If you were to think in terms of what I want, that's generally put down in terms of, well, we've got to take everyone along, or we have to think in terms of the family, we have to think in terms of the group, we have to think in terms of a culture, society, nation. not in terms of what do you want out of it. So I think that uh, by the time that someone is getting into a relationship or a marriage, people have barely individuated. I mean, that's a term that we use a lot in our therapy. By that, individuation ka ye matlab hai that how do you stand out in the world? If someone were to ask you who you are, a response can be that, oh, I don't know, I come from this family, or I go to this school, or I belong to this sect. That still says something about the group. It doesn't say who you are. It's still an answer from the outside in कि मैं इस particular community का, group का, family का, इस particular uh, s- bigger structure का एक smaller part to, instead of this, that okay, well, who are you uniquely as your own self. So I think that by the time people are entering into a relationship, they have barely become a person of their own self. And then we're throwing them into a challenge where they're meant to be with another person who probably has barely become their own self. And then
Exactly.
from that, two half formed individuals, we're expecting them to not only come together and be resonant with each other, but also then procreate, have a family together, and have a harmonious working between their families. And then, as they say in our culture, which is that a marriage isn't just you and me, a marriage is a whole
Yeah.
family and everyone going together.
Yeah.
And we're mixing so many complicated parts and we're expecting them to gel with each other, whereas those have not even become clear enough in their own self that ye part hai kya, before we're expecting them to go together with each other. So I think that
Exactly.
complicates things in some matters.
Yeah, yeah. So, Umar, the way you put it, it looks like a tall order.
Mm,
Getting married and being with someone, it doesn't sound very easy, right? It
yeah.
sounds like a process. It sounds like a developmental process. ठीक
Hmm.
है, डेवलपमेंटल प्रोसेस से मेरा मतलब ये है कि एक चीज जो आहिस्ता आहिस्ता ग्रो करती है, बड़ी होती है, ठीक
Hmm.
है, रादर देन जो एकदम से ओवरनाइट वजूद में आती है, ठीक
Yeah.
है, क्योंकि शादी तो आपकी ओवरनाइट होती है ना। आप
Yeah.
मूव तो एक घर से दूसरे घर में एक एक ओवरनाइट करते हैं, आपकी बीवी आपके घर में ओवरनाइट आती है,
Mm,
लेकिन
mm.
जो रिश्ता बनता है वो डेवलप होने में
Yeah.
बहुत साल, बहुत वक्त लगता है। जैसे आप समझा रहे हैं उस तरह से तो मुझे यही लगता है कि इट टेक्स अ लॉन्ग टाइम फॉर टू पीपल टू एक्चुअली
Yeah.
इंडिविजुएट एंड देन लर्न टू बी टुगेदर।
Yeah, of course. I mean, I don't know how accurate that number is, but I once read in one for one researcher of marriage therapy, they believe that it takes at least 7 to 8 years for a marriage to come
यस,
to a place of stability.
यस।
So, I mean, whereas we're expecting that as soon as people have met, families have come together, December 28th, आपकी शादी हो गई on December 29th, well, you should be getting along. Everything should work out between you, your
Start
family,
calling his
everyone.
parents अम्मी and अब्बू।
Yeah, of course.
फैमिली को अडॉप्ट कर लो
Yeah.
ओवरनाइट। सो
So
आई थिंक
I like that way of looking at how we are then cutting that developmental process and we are imposing a structure and we're just saying that you are meant to be someone else from tomorrow onwards, which seems very, I mean, the way we work, the way we understand human nature, that really defies what we see every day in our therapy rooms. That the change that can happen is always a very slow, graded, very gentle process जिसमें आपको भी agree करना है, दूसरे को भी agree करना है, और despite the two people agreeing that we are both willing to change and we can both inspire each other to change, that process could take many months or years for two people to put that into some sort of a practice. Whereas in the case of this institution, we very quickly expect outcomes, which can be quite disappointing.
या आई एग्री एंड वही फिर डिसग्रंटल्ड फीलिंग्स जो होती हैं वो मैंने बहुत दफा देखा है कि बिकॉज आई एम आल्सो पार्ट ऑफ तानियाज ग्रुप, तो
Hmm?
वो फिर एटलीस्ट women have that kind of space where they can talk about those
Hmm.
disappointments,
Hmm.
right? Tanya, are you back here with us? Hello, Tanya, are you here?
Tanya's voice is still muffled.
Yeah, still muffled. I think there's some. She's tried so many devices and so many different internets. I don't know what's wrong with this today. Anyway, so एक और जो तानिया जो बात कर रही थी कि she has seen a range of emotions, struggles, joys, um, you know wishes are in her group,
Mm,
coming from women from different socioeconomic classes, from different areas, and different walks of life. And what she has noticed is कि हर तरह की stories होती है, बहुत extreme, जिसमें
mm,
शादी शुरू होते साथ ही बहुत ज़्यादा टर्मोइल आना शुरू हो जाता
mm,
है, जब के कहीं पे बहुत साइलेंट किस्म की ट्रांजिशन होती है,
mm,
साइलेंट किस्म की स्ट्रगल्स होती हैं, और फिर उससे ही जो है ओवर द इयर्स इतनी ज़्यादा घुटन पैदा होती है
mm,
दैट इट turns into some kind of conflict,
mm,
some
mm.
kind of turmoil in a marriage. So what is your experience, Umar, कि किस तरह की रेंज होती है एक्सपीरियंसेस की लोगों की?
Mm. I think the sort of things that I am very accustomed to hearing in my therapy room, if I were considering a wide range of women who over the years have spoken about their relationships and their marriages, I think one thing is to start with that a lot of our relationships are based on very superficial sort of criteria of compatibility, that even in whether it's between two people having been introduced by families or by friends or anyone, or they have dated for a little bit of time, or for a large number of people, whereas the introduction has just been done by a family, or the marriages are more arranged in nature. I think one of the things that sticks out for people is the incompatibility, that as they get into the relationship and they're discovering how different the other person is from them,
Yeah,
a lot
yeah,
of times they're discovering mental health illnesses there,
yeah.
that have not been disclosed earlier, or for example they're discovering that everything that was presented at the get go from the men's side, that hamari family ye hai, hamara ye hai, hamara ye hai, there's a certain shift in that, which is that sometimes things aren't like that, or how
Mm-hmm.
the man was presented, what his job was presented, how his personality might have even come across. Eventually that sales pitch is not what you're eventually finding in the real product, and then the challenge becomes that the big sanction exists, which is that even in families where a woman can easily go and say that I don't want to be with this man, or this man is very different from who I expected, a woman themselves is feeling that they cannot get out of that marriage, because if they did get out of that marriage, the chances of them to remarry, or the chances of them to be labeled, or the chances of them to be then seen as, well, it must be their fault, they're so high that there's a high premium on leaving that marriage. So there is more of that, which is that now I've got to make do with it. And in a large majority of cases, even in my observation, in very educated, sophisticated families, women are just told that, well, make it work, or they themselves have that sense of guilt, which is like, oh, look at my poor mother, पूरी जिंदगी उन्होंने मारे खाई, पूरी जिंदगी उन्होंने इतने बुरे हस्बैंड के साथ गुजारा किया, तो अब मैं कौन होती हूँ कि मैं एक इतने से डिफरेंस पे, कि हमारी इंटेलेक्चुअली नहीं बनती, या हम इतना छोटे से डिफरेंस पे, दैट उन्होंने तो कहा था कि हर साल हम वेकेशन पे जाएंगे, एंड नाउ आई एम फाइंडिंग आउट दैट दे हैव नो मनी, इतने छोटे से डिफरेंस पे व्हाई शुड आई sort of not work it out. So I think that's one theme that I do observe a lot, which is that there's a huge disappointment from what it was meant to be, not only in terms of that social construction, which is ke आपकी जिंदगी तब शुरू होएगी जब एक दफा आपकी शादी हो जाएगी. Both men and women in some ways have been told that, which is that when men are in some ways for the first time they are seen with a girl, or uh, they're caught talking to a girl on the phone, they are meant to eventually have a life once they are maybe in a relationship and they're married. And for a girl, whether it is that what clothes you can wear, or who you can meet, and what you can do, and who you travel with, eventually the solution to all of that is when you're married. And now the thing
Yeah,
is, now they've
yeah.
been married to someone, and
They don't
not
like
only
it.
is that not happening, but then they find out that the person, despite all chosen compatibilities of sect bhi wahi hai, socioeconomic class bhi hai, wahi hai, sab kuch wahi hai, and then there's that great disappointment, which is that I'm meant to live the next 50 years of my life with this person, You only
Hmm.
technically live once, and
So,
now what
so
do I do with
Omar,
this life?
sorry, I'm cutting you here. मुझे बताएं then where does that heartbreak and where does that disappointment go? I mean, उसको express करने के क्या मतलब तरीके होते हैं? How does it show up in a marriage?
I think that one place that it usually shows up is in some forms of dysfunction. That dysfunction can be localized either in the couple themselves, that the couple is fighting each other out
Yeah,
over everyday matters, which is that why are you doing this, why are you not doing this, मुझे पैसे क्यों नहीं दिए, तुम बच्चों से ऐसे क्यों बात करते हो, तुम मेरी अम्मा से ऐसे क्यों नहीं करते, तुम मुझसे ऐसे
yeah,
क्यों नहीं करते. It's
yeah,
either
yeah.
localized there, and
Hmm.
some point one of the things that might happen is that people might just even stop fighting, and then it
Yeah,
might be transferred to the next generation, that
yeah,
that
yeah,
conflict is now being intergenerationally passed on, which is that hamari to
yeah,
banni nahi hai, and then
yeah,
in our culture the sense which is that then you stay together for the kids, so then
yeah.
that
Hmm.
passed on to the kids, which is the unhappiness of the couple then becomes the
Exactly.
unhappiness that the
Yeah,
system has to bear.
yeah, yeah,
Or
absolutely.
then in
Absolutely.
other ways, if it's not that, then things are being more often than not they're being done in a very passive aggressive manner, that more often than
Hmm.
not a woman is withdrawing from the relationship, and then she's
Yes.
pulling the strings of a relationship in either some sort of a manipulation, because she has no power. The only thing she
Yes.
can do is that in whatever ways indirectly she can assert power, she's doing that. And a
अपनी
man who
affection
has,
वापस ले लेती है,
they can
attention
take away the
affection वापस
affection,
लेती है.
they can withdraw intimacy, they can,
हाँ.
I don't know, focus all their attention on
on
children, they
on kids.
can
ये तो बहुत common dynamic है
yeah,
ना, that
yeah.
you must have seen outside of therapy also, and I'm
Mm,
sure our audience has also witnessed that. um, कि ये एक पोलैरिटी क्रिएट हो जाती है फैमिली में, कि फिर
uh-huh,
जिसको कहते हैं ना कि खवातीन अपने बच्चों के साथ अपना दिल लगा लेती हैं, अपनी जिंदगी उन्हीं के इर्द गिर्द, और फिर
yeah,
काइंड ऑफ फादर जो होता है वो इजेक्ट हो जाता है सिस्टम
yeah.
से. You know,
Yeah.
he
So
doesn't
to start with, the
initially
man has been told that his role is outside of the home, his role is to earn money, his role is to be there, and that gets even further polarized, which is that my space is just outside of the home. My job is only to work as a machine to bring in the money, to make sure that the system has enough to feed on, or the system has enough whatever the system needs of me, but my social, emotional, sexual needs are going to be fulfilled outside of the marriage. So I
हाँ
should
हाँ,
spend time
let's
with my
talk about men then. Let's talk
mm,
about men then, क्योंकि ये जो काइंड ऑफ डाइकोटमी है ना, ये पोलराइजेशन, ये मैंने बहुत जिंदगी में भी देखी है, अपने ऑफिसेज में भी देखी है, कि
mm,
फिर वो जो एक सिस्टम बन जाता है ना, जिसमें women are then really enmeshed with the kids, और बच्चों के गिर्द उनकी जिंदगी घूमती है, और वो एक बहुत पावरफुल सिस्टम बन जाता है
mm,
कि उसमें दोबारा अगर बाप चाहे भी, मर्द चाहे
mm,
भी, तो वो री एंटर नहीं कर पाता.
mm,
राइट.
mm.
वो फिर सर
Yeah,
मारता रहता है, जब उसके पास वक्त भी होता है, वो रिटायर होता है, वो वापस
yeah,
आके कोशिश करता है कि इंटीग्रेट हो जाए उस सिस्टम में,
uh-huh,
तो वो नहीं हो पाता. राइट.
yeah,
So let's talk about the journey for men. You
mm,
know,
mm,
कि उनके लिए शादीशुदा जिंदगी में उनकी क्या स्ट्रगल्स होती हैं, अगर
mm,
शुरू से देखा
mm,
जाए कि
yeah,
राइट आफ्टर मैरिज, जैसे औरतों के लिए तो होती है ना कि वो एक
mm,
घर अपना छोड़ के आई हैं, अपने लोग
mm,
छोड़ के आई हैं, अपनी सेंस ऑफ ह्यूमर छोड़ के आई हैं, अपने इंटेलेक्चुअल
mm,
कनेक्शन छोड़ के आई हैं, उन्होंने नया पैदा करना है. सही है.
mm.
तो मर्दों के लिए आपके ख्याल में फ्रॉम द गेट गो क्या स्ट्रगल्स होती हैं?
Actually, before I answer that, I want to just check if
तानिया,
Tanya is
हाँ.
in. I can
तानिया,
see her
you
now.
here?
I am, but I don't know if you guys can hear me.
Yeah, yeah,
We
we can.
can. We can. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Wow. I'm sorry. इससे पहले कि मेरा कट जाए, I just want to like apologize to everyone for the inconvenience and all of this is
I
going
know
on.
you're so popular. Everybody's like join back. So I'm like, yeah,
Oh.
Tanya is the light of the show. Where is she gone?
और I'm feeling so stressed out, और I feel like आप लोगों का profession
Don't
ऐसा है,
be.
you're all so calm and collected, and I'm just like
We've lost Tanya again.
Again, I feel so bad. I mean, I really wanted
Mm,
to talk to her. She's
yeah.
so good with these kind of issues. You're a man, so you're not on this group, Umar, but I am. And one of the good things about this group is कि वो बहुत अच्छी सेफ स्पेस है to
Mm-hmm.
bring up issues that are really close to your heart, and it's
Mm-hmm.
very non-judgmental, and generally
Mm-hmm.
बहुत सारी ऐसी बातें इस ग्रुप के ऊपर होती
Mm-hmm.
हैं जो कि अदरवाइज आई थिंक मेरे
Mm-hmm.
पास भी शायद स्पेस ना हो करने की. सो
Okay.
आई
I
आई
think
थिंक
so. So
दैट
again, I can we hear Tanya?
नहीं, तानिया, we can't hear you, it's still really muffled.
Let me type that for her.
Hmm.
I think she's going to try to reconnect.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Let's
So
pick up
over,
from
I
what you
was
asked.
just
I think that again, like you said that with even communities like us, the village. If you think about this, I personally don't
मर्दों
know an
की नहीं है,
equivalent of that with men.
नहीं है,
Maybe there is
नहीं
something
है,
like that. That in itself should tell you something about how the field is structured, which is that
बिल्कुल.
that
मर्दों को तो सपोर्ट चाहिए नहीं होती.
that with men maybe from a very young age the primary role that exists for them is performance. So for
No,
example,
that's
if a
right.
girl is not
That's
getting
right.
her 7 A's or 8 A's or 12 A's or 20 A's, it's still okay. I mean, it's fine. But if a man is not getting it, it's a life and death thing for families, which is oh, what will you do in your life? And then at every stage you can just not fail. You've just got to make it. You have
Yeah.
got to be in the top. You've got to do the sport and you've got to get the good grades and you've got to get into the best university and you've got to get the best jobs, and the prize at the end of that is maybe a marriage. But I mean, the very preparation that gets into being in a relationship, their entire preparation has been to be a machine, to go at a job,
Hmm.
to maybe be
Hmm.
strong. I mean,
Hmm.
that's what is the concept of toxic masculinity, which is that the primary lens through which you've been trained to see the world is dominance and authority and aggression. That sense of
That's
hunt or be
right.
hunted, which is कि मैं क्लास में जो हूँ 10th आ रहा हूँ और जो फर्स्ट आ रहा है इसका मतलब है वो अच्छा है और आप जो है वो बुरे हैं. आप जब तक
Hmm.
थर्ड नहीं होंगे या फर्स्ट नहीं होंगे तब तक आप बुरे हैं, या किसी और को जॉब मिल
Hmm.
रही है आपको नहीं मिल रही. That might also have to do with that evolutionary sense that we all have that part of our brain that reads that sense, which is okay, if I am not being chosen, that means that I'll probably not survive. Yeah, if someone else is better than me, then that means that they have a better chance of survival than me. Whereas in the real world, it might not always look like that. I mean,
Hmm.
people, I mean,
Hmm.
the backbenchers eventually find their way in life as well, and the last
Hmm.
person in the class sometimes is the smartest person coming around. But
Hmm.
we have trained and conditioned men in that way, which is that they've got to perform, they've got
Hmm.
to be strong. Self-care is for women, which is that you're tough, scruffy, you're meant to always outperform and go. And if you are not able to go, men don't cry, men don't feel pain. I mean, this is an everyday thing. I mean, I literally saw that even today somewhere, which is at my daughter's swimming class, a boy fell down and he just held his knee and he was just about to say ouch, this hurts, and his father just said that's you're okay, just that's fine.
Oh,
Don't. So I mean, it's
okay.
it's that immediate reflex, which is that you're not meant to feel that pain. So
That's
eventually the
true.
message that we are giving to men is that be disconnected from your body. And
Hmm.
now fast forward 20 years where we're saying that you're meant to be in a relationship, you're meant to be gentle, you're meant to be all of those wonderful things that it takes for the running of a relationship. We have a man who's already primed for performance, disconnected from their body, untrained for being in relationships, already trained in being very aggressive minded, and they have been told that that has to be how it is. If you're not aggressive, if you're soft, if you don't sort of outdo others, then you will sort of be at the short end of the stick. And then what does that make you? You're not meant to be a wuss, you're not meant to be sissy. Any effeminate traits in you are not acceptable. You're always meant to be on the top of your game. If that's a man that we are creating, then eventually I think that it's very difficult to then put them into a relational capacity and expect something good to come out of it or something gentle to come out of it, and hence a lot of conflict and
Hmm.
clash. Maybe hence
Hmm.
a lot of women gathering together in that sense of
Hmm.
vulnerability and saying,
Hmm.
look what's happening in my life, whereas the
Hmm.
men, I'm imagining, and look,
Hmm.
I'm saying this very, very, very gently. There's no excuse for violence. When I say this, I have no even atom of empathy for someone who is presently violent or someone who is physically abusive. I'm not talking about that. I'm not justifying that. But in my working with men who are angry, who are aggressive, who are violent, they have very little insight into that behavior. When you're talking to them, it's I don't think that they see there's anything wrong with that. They've seen their fathers do it. They have been a victim of that themselves. In the case of most violent men, I don't have a number, but if I had a number, I'd say 90% of them have been physically abused themselves, or they've been sexually abused, or they have been molested in some capacity or the other. They have been through that grind where you are either the top dog or the underdog. If you don't
They're
get,
hardened.
if you,
They're
yeah, so I
hardened.
mean, eventually, then they're just passing on the trauma. They received the trauma, and then
Right.
they're just passing it
Right.
on. So, like I said, I'm not justifying the behavior, but as a therapist, when I am obligated to sit with a person just to understand, which is that where is this coming from? Almost always it's coming from somewhere. And as we work through those layers and layers and layers of that onion peeling, and where's that trauma coming from, more often than not, men and women are very remarkably similar. There's even
Yes.
something that is
Yes.
called neurosexism, that हमने हमेशा से एक वो बना दिया कि oh, men don't feel and women are all feeling, whereas if you look at scientific literature, there is barely any difference between men and women's brains.
Hmm.
आपकी
Hmm.
ब्रेन का जो एक
Hmm.
हिस्सा है जो इमोशंस प्रोसेस करता है, मेरा और आपका मरियम एक ही है, बट इट्स
हाँ,
जस्ट
हाँ.
दैट मे बी you use
Hmm.
it more. I've never been encouraged to use it, hence that part of your brain works better, and
Hmm.
mine is just rusty
Yeah.
and doesn't.
Yeah, yeah. And Omar, I look at that kind of जैसे मुझे एक space मिली है कि I can talk about, if I'm disgruntled in my marriage, right? If I have disappointments, I can sit with my girlfriends, I can sit with my
Mm.
family, I can sit with, a group of people, and I can voice it.
Mm-hmm.
ठीक है. एंड मर्दों में व्हाट आई ऑब्जर्व्ड, उनका दोस्तों से भी इस तरह का ताल्लुक नहीं होता कि वो बैठ के अपनी बीवी के बारे में या उससे
Yeah.
अपने रिलेशनशिप में दरपेश मुश्किलात के बारे में
Yeah.
बात कर सकें कंस्ट्रक्टिव तरीके से. सो
Mm-hmm.
बहुत सारी दफा मैंने जो नोटिस किया है कि देन इट टर्न्स इनटू दैट काइंड ऑफ मिसोजिनिस्टिक ह्यूमर कि
Yeah. Yeah.
औरतें तो, बीवियां तो आपको पता ही है तशद्दुद करती हैं, बीवियां तो आपको
Uh,
पता ही है,
yeah.
ऐसी होती हैं वैसी होती
Yeah.
हैं.
Yeah.
तो मुझे माय हार्ट एक्चुअली गोज आउट टू देम कि बेचारों
Yeah.
को कभी वो स्पेस ही नहीं मिली, क्योंकि
Yeah.
मसले हर जगह होते हैं. ये
Yeah.
क्लैशेस जो हैं ये एक
Mm.
रिलेशनशिप का हिस्सा है, वो आते हैं.
Oh,
लेकिन उसकी
absolutely.
ना रिलेशनशिप के अंदर कोई गुंजाइश होती है
Yeah.
प्रोसेस करने की, ना उसके बाहर कोई उनको जगह मिलती है. तो
Yeah.
वो फिर एक ऐसी बन जाती है. वो सेंस ऑफ ह्यूमर आपने देखी होगी, बहुत ही
Yeah,
मिसोजिनिस्टिक
of
होगी.
course. Yeah. So yeah, I
और
think that that goes both ways, which is that I mean, sometimes people will very spontaneously air that, which is that a man may say that, oh well, my wife, that I mean, most of her time is spent just talking on the phone or just using her makeup, and her wife might say कि ये तो जी कभी आपको तो पता है कि ये तो कभी भी मेरी तरफ
हाँ,
ये भी नहीं करते, देखते भी नहीं है, बात भी नहीं करते,
हाँ,
something. And again, that there are very few spaces for, again, women might still be able to go someone and say, well, I feel really alone, I feel very lonely, I feel very hurt, I feel very sad. But more often than not with men, they are just they're
नहीं होती
acting out.
है.
They're
That's
going to take it
right.
out on their road rage. They're going to take out in
That's
some
right.
sort of aggression. If this is a boss, they get to take it out on an employee. If this is a man,
Mhm.
they probably are going to pass it on onto some other thing, or try to make something of it, or overwork themselves. And I think we don't talk about this enough, but in our society, there's an extremely high incidence of substance use. I
Yes,
mean,
absolutely.
anywhere from, if we stop looking at that, I mean, it seems very normal, but it seems very normalized. But cigarette smoking is so common. again, a man is not even aware of that, which is that throughout the day they're going, and every hour they have to stop. They take they have a smoke, they do something. So many men in the corporate culture, I hear from them, which is that they're working till they're 8 p.m. and then they're a bunch of men are gathering together for a couple of drinks, or this is how they are continuing to anesthetize that pain, which is
That's
that
right.
I am
That's right.
bringing pain from my relationships. I'm trying
That's
to
right.
extinguish that somewhat at work. It doesn't work out, and I use
That's right.
substances. And then for the rest of the day, I'm using substances. When nothing works, I show up at a psychiatrist. I show up at a therapist, and I say, "Fix me. My work is
Yeah.
suffering." Whereas no
That's
one is
right.
saying, "Well, I'm really suffering. I'm really hurt. I feel
Yeah.
unheard
Yeah.
in my marriage. I feel very hurt. I don't feel connected. I'm now married to someone, and I don't know how to navigate that. I don't
That's right.
know." And men, I think maybe some of that may have to do with their having more comfort with speaking to me as a man, but more often than not I hear this so many times. They're saying that you are the first person we're saying this outside of us, कि ये बात हम कभी कभार अपने आप को भी नहीं कहते, कि हम कहते हैं कि यार ये वाली बात क्या है करने वाली है सोचने वाली। आप वो पहले इंसान है outside of us with whom we're even sharing this. So
Right.
I think
Right.
that might be the beginning of where they're even able to start voicing that they have an inner life, they're entitled to feelings, and they don't need to act out on those feelings
True.
as anger.
True.
So
True.
I think very soon, sorry, very late in life, most men discover that anger is an emotion, anger is not an action. Violence,
Hmm.
what becomes violent 10 steps before that, it is just anger, it is hurt, it is loneliness, it is a sense of misdirection, it is not being understood, it is a million other things. And if we had a language, if we had an expression of that, if they had those ways and means to say that to another person, that here's what I'm experiencing, here's what I'm feeling, then a new conversation could start. We could at least try to bridge some narratives. We can try to find some ways that something could be done about it before it gets much worse. Mariam, and you and I, in our cases, more often than not, हम जब लोगों के साथ काम कर रहे होते हैं, people are more often than not showing up in our offices when things are quite bad for them, when
Quiet. Yes.
everything is
So,
breaking
हाँ,
apart.
Umar, that's why I'm actually having this conversation today. कि मेरे पास 15 साल बाद भी जब आते हैं
Mm,
ना, तो when things are like I'm kind of मैं अलग अलग कर रही होती हूँ चीजें, तो पता चलता है कि अभी तक वो जो hurt थी ना, कि right after we got married,
mm,
और
yep.
पहली बर्थडे याद नहीं रही, और
Mm,
वो एक जो माँ और बीवी का मुसलसल एक कंपैरिजन चलता रहा,
mm,
और जो इनिशियल इयर्स में बहुत ज्यादा फैमिली और जॉइंट फैमिली का इन्फ्लुएंस था, वो
mm,
अभी तक वही रिजॉल्व नहीं हुई है। वो
yep.
अनरिजॉल्व हर्ट, अनरिजॉल्व पेन दोनों एंड्स पे वो बढ़ती
Mhm,
जाती है। और
yeah.
मेरा जो सबसे बड़ा डिलेमा है, जिसकी वजह से ये कॉन्वर्सेशन दीज कॉन्वर्सेशंस आर रियली क्लोज टू माय हार्ट, कि इनको कभी सीरियसली नहीं लिया जाता,
Mm,
ड्रामों की हद तक, ठीक
uh-huh.
है, कि
Yep.
वो ड्रामा देख लिया, ड्रामों में ऐसा होता है, और जो हर
Mm,
घर में होता है उसको आप ड्रामा
mm,
कहते हैं, ये ड्रामे तो
mm.
चलते
Oh,
रहते हैं,
wow. Yeah.
राइट?
Yeah.
लेकिन वो बहुत तकलीफदेह होते हैं, वो
Mhm.
इंसान की जहनी सेहत पे, मर्द की
Yep.
जहनी सेहत और औरत की जहनी सेहत,
Yep.
जिसका इम्पैक्ट उसके आगे खानदान, उसके बच्चों पे पड़ता है,
Yeah.
उसकी अर्निंग कैपेसिटी पे पड़ता है,
Mhm.
उसकी सोशल लाइफ के ऊपर पड़ता है। उसको कोई रिकग्नाइज, पुलिस नहीं रिकग्नाइज करती, ठीक है,
Uh-huh.
अप टिल लाइक वेरी रिसेंटली पुलिस भी
Mm.
कहती थी कि जी वायलेंस जो है वो घर का
Uh-huh.
मामला है,
Yeah.
सही है।
Yeah. Yeah.
हम कहते हैं जी सास बहू के झगड़े तो हर घर में होते हैं,
Mm.
इनसे जस्ट
Mm.
जर बड़ा
Mm.
करो, दिल बड़ा करो, गेट ओवर इट,
Uh-huh.
राइट?
Yep.
So I was actually quite surprised, and I've given this example million
Mm.
times, कि जो ऑप्रा विनफ्री ने वो किया था, इंटरव्यू किया था उसका, क्या नाम है, हैरी एंड मेगन का, राइट?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So Megan talked about a lot of her struggles in the joint family system, क्योंकि वो उस joint
Mm.
family system में रहती थी,
Mm.
ठीक है, टू द पॉइंट कि जी मेरे बच्चे का रंग क्यों काला है,
Mm.
इस तरह
Mm.
की कॉन्वर्सेशन से लेके
Mm.
तो जी मुझे बाहर जाने की इजाजत नहीं मिलती, जो कि
Mm.
हमारे फैमिली सिस्टम्स में इसी
Yep.
तरह की चीजें होती है ना, जो शुरू में तकलीफ का बायस बनती है।
Yep.
सो ऑपरा विनफ्री शी टीयर्ड अप,
Mm.
ठीक है, क्योंकि ये एक पेनफुल चीज है। हमारे यहाँ तो इसको कॉन्वर्सेशन को सीरियसली
Yeah.
लिया ही नहीं जाता बजाय इसके कि उसके ऊपर किसी को रोना है कि किसी को तकलीफ महसूस हो कि ये
Yeah.
कोई इंपॉर्टेंट बात है जिसके जिसके ऊपर किसी को दुख हो रहा है, somebody is going through some kind of
Mm.
hurt and pain.
Yeah.
So I think that's why these conversations are really
Yeah.
important क्योंकि in my office also
Mm.
बातें फिर वो निकलती हैं जो शुरू
Mm.
के 5 साल, जो शुरू के 7 साल,
Mm.
जिसमें ग्रोथ के लिए जगह नहीं मिल सकी, जिसमें एक दूसरे को समझने के लिए जगह नहीं मिल सकी. They just come in the way of the rest of your developmental development also.
Yeah. Yeah, वही बात है ना जो हम वर्ड कॉन्फ्लुएंस यूज करते हैं, दैट there's so much pressure to be together, to become one, and even that sense of, well, you complete me, that sense of a thing, which is that two halves come together and they make a full. I think that that
Right.
entire depiction is so distorted कि आप that you are that without a female companion you are some no one, and without a male companion you're no one, and the moment that we put the two north and south together, magic will happen and they'll complete each other and they'll just be living happily ever after. In real life it rarely happens that way. Instead,
Yeah.
I think, as people, unless if we can be full ourselves, our relationships will always be lacking in some ways. And it makes more sense for two people who are already fully formed, they understand who they are, what their needs are, to then be able to communicate to each other that I want this from you
Yeah.
and I don't feel understood by you, and the other person not being defensive about it.
That's
And I
right.
think that in our therapy rooms we do that so often, where we are continuing to tell people to acknowledge the other person. You don't have to agree to
That's
them.
right.
और मेरे ख्याल
That's
है वो
right.
भी हमारी एक
That's
इतनी
right.
problematic हमारी एक, I think that very early on in our society we've learned to be so defensive that किसी दूसरे
Hmm.
की, I mean, even that sense that we always have कि किसी को अपनी weakness नहीं दिखानी. Even we have that sense
Hmm.
which is कि कभी किसी को तारीफ नहीं करनी. अगर किसी की कोई अच्छी बात भी है
Hmm.
उसने आपने कहनी नहीं है कि वो बहुत बड़े, आई डोंट नो, उनकी ईगो बड़ी हो जाएगी या
Hmm.
वो कल को फिर आपको अच्छा नहीं समझेंगे. फैमिली में किसी के बाहर
Hmm.
किसी की अच्छी बात उन्हें ना बताना, वरना वो ऊंचे हो जाएंगे, हम नीचे हो
Hmm.
जाएंगे. There is so much emphasis on just that push and pull and that power, that
Hmm.
whereas
Power
for two
struggle.
people
Yeah.
to come together, we are equally just saying that even to an enemy we can say that, okay, well, I understand you hate me because kal raat ko I favored my mother over you. I understand that what you're saying might be deeply hurtful for you. I understand what that it has made you feel very hurt. I understand it has made you feel very lonely in my house, that you are coming from another family.
Hmm.
Now, I am just acknowledging the other person, that what you have talked to me, what you have told me, I don't even have to agree with it. I can turn around and say, but yet that is still my mother. I have to care about
But
my
Omar,
mother
ये
yet.
मुश्किल है ना? Don't you
Yeah.
think it's a very difficult place for a man
Oh, of
to
course.
to hold both perspectives?
Yeah.
You know, कि I love
Absolutely.
my mother,
Yeah.
but she was unfair to you.
Yeah. Of
You know,
course.
like
Yeah.
I think it's a
And that's
very
the problem,
challenging
that that
task.
that that there is that problem, which is that अगर मैंने इधर साइड ले ली तो वो वाली साइड नाराज हो जाएगी, और उधर साइड ले ली ये वाली साइड नाराज हो जाएगी. That's how we unfortunately do conflict in our society, which is that only one side can win. या वो
Yeah,
साइड ठीक है या
that's
हम
true.
ठीक है, या वो अच्छे हैं या हम बुरे हैं. That sense of that polarization in the conflict that has existed, I think that's how it exists in our culture, that we don't have good mechanisms of conflict resolution. हमारा conflict
Hmm.
resolution is only that sense which is कि या हम सही होंगे या दूसरा सही होगा, और हमारी पूरी कोशिश इस तरह की होनी चाहिए कि दूसरे को कम दिखा दें. We can
Hmm.
strong arm them into losing, so that then I can emerge as victorious, and that resolves the conflict. Which is कि अगर 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 बच्चे जो है मेरे तरीके से पल रहे हैं और आपके तरीके को मैं जीरो कर दूं, then in a way then conflict is resolved. But conflict is not resolved. Conflict has just been in some ways been brushed under the
Hmm.
rug, and there will
Hmm.
be resentment. There will be
Hmm.
people feeling bad about it, and eventually we have just artificially made it look like a conflict khatam ho gaya, jabki nahi hai. Whereas I think in solving conflict, a very important part first is to acknowledge the other, that
Hmm.
you are a worthy opponent. I am fully
Hmm.
recognizing कि आपकी reality मेरे से बहुत फर्क है. आप और मैं
Hmm.
बेशक आज किसी चीज पे agree नहीं भी कर रहे, but you and I are still in a relationship. You and I are fighting over my mother right now, that my mother expects that हर दफा जब हमने बाहर रेस्टोरेंट जाना है वो भी साथ जाएंगी, आपको बहुत बुरा लगता है, उनको मैं छोड़ नहीं सकता. I am acknowledging that this is a problem, but you and me are going to still work on this relationship. We
That's
don't have a
right.
solution yet. We don't know how this may unfold. I can't ditch her. I can't ditch you. I don't know how to navigate this space, but I am still in this relationship with you. Just
That's
that
right.
sense, which is that we can, and both for that even parent, which is, I mean, I hear this from men so much that I cannot even begin to tell you, where men feel that immense amount of guilt, which is कि मेरी माँ
Hmm.
ने जो है मेरे अपने मियाँ से मारे खाई हुई है. मेरी माँ को मेरे बाप ने कभी लिफ्ट नहीं कराई. मेरा बाप तो हर वक्त बाहर मुल्क में रहता था. मेरा बाप के तो हर वक्त अफेयर्स थे. मेरा बाप तो हर वक्त बीमार था. मेरे बाप ने तो कभी पैसे नहीं दिए. मेरी माँ की पूरी इन्वेस्टमेंट वाज टू मेक मी सक्सेसफुल. उन्होंने अपना जेवर बेच के मुझे पाला. उन्होंने अपना, I don't know, something out of a sad movie that she did, and now I'm ready and I'm great, and now she's married me to someone. Yet now I am her carer. I am her
Hmm.
everything. And if
Hmm.
I dump her, then what about all her sacrifice? That her life's work was me. And if I
Hmm.
become one with someone else, or if I
Committed to
start
someone, yes.
investing
Hmm.
into my own family, then what about
Hmm.
her sadness and her loneliness? And I
Hmm.
can't do
Hmm.
that. I can't deal with that, and the immense guilt that they feel with that.
या सो उमर यही तो वो इनविजिबल टाइज हैं जो मेरा
Hmm.
ख्याल है मर्दों को शादी होते साथ ही फील होनी शुरू हो जाती है.
Yeah.
उससे पहले वो दोस्तों के साथ हुंजा चले जाएं ओवर नाइट,
Hmm.
मतलब बगैर माँ को बताए हुए, इट
Hmm.
डजंट रियली मैटर. बट
Yeah.
शादी के बाद ये जो इनविजिबल टाइज है ना, ये बहुत
Hmm.
टाइट होने लगती हैं. एक फंदा होता है, एक शिकंजा होता है मर्दों के अराउंड भी,
Hmm.
जो शादी से पहले उसमें वो मनूवर कर रहे होते हैं, बट शादी के बाद वो तंग होना शुरू हो जाता है.
Yeah.
So I actually feel really bad for them also, and they don't know, they're not prepared for that. The
Hmm.
best they can do is learn कि अच्छा जी मेरे बाप ने और मेरे भाई ने इस
Hmm.
शिकंजे के साथ ऐसे डील किया था.
Uh-huh.
तो वो या तो बहुत डिफेंसिव हो कि
Yeah.
ऑलरेडी दे गो इनटू द मैरिज
Hmm.
फीलिंग डिफेंसिव एंड पहली रात को ही लेक्चर देते हैं कि जी
Uh-huh.
मेरी माँ जो है वो
Yeah. Yeah.
उसका दर्जा
Of
हमेशा
course.
तुमसे ऊपर ही रहेगा.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
या तो डिफेंसिव
absolutely.
स्ट्रेटजी से
That
जाती हैं
very early on you're establishing, which is that this is how it's going to be.
yeah, and
And
it is
again,
so hurtful. It's so
yeah,
hurtful for women,
yeah, of course.
because वो ये सोच के नहीं आई होती कि
Yeah,
that's the first
yeah,
thing I'm gonna hear
yeah.
about when
And
we get married.
unfortunately, a lot of women have left their parents' home with that resentment, that they were told that this is how it will be here. Your life starts with your
That's
family,
right.
or their best escape from an abusive family of origin was कि अगर मेरी शादी हो जाएगी, the moment I am with someone, my hope is कि then I will never have to deal with my own toxic parents. कि मेरे पेरेंट्स ने मेरे साथ जो किया, पूरी जिंदगी मेरी कभी बात नहीं मानी, अपनी मर्जी की चीज नहीं पढ़ने दी, रात को बाहर नहीं जाने दिया, लड़कों से बात नहीं करने दी, कभी अपने मर्जी के
Hmm.
कपड़े नहीं पहनने दिए, वो सारा कुछ. I mean that's the mild sense of that. The more extreme sense of that is where there's ongoing abuse, there's verbal, physical abuse,
Yeah,
where a woman's self-esteem is being undercut into a very limited sense of what she's being prepared to only be a wife. Now eventually she's taking her hopes and ambitions to a marriage, and there she is on the first day she's being told that, oh, by the way, you're always subservient to my mother. This is
all
what your
yeah,
role is. You're not doing anything
yeah.
else. This is what it is. And I mean, then we're pretty much putting them in from one worse situation to another worse
To
situation, and
another,
expecting something good
बिल्कुल.
to come out of it.
ग्रेट. अच्छा उमर, हमारे पास सिर्फ 10 मिनट रह गए.
Yeah.
सो मुझे एक दो जो सवालात यहाँ पे नजर आ रहे हैं, उनमें से एक बात ऑडियंस ने आपकी पिक की है कि कॉन्फ्लिक्ट रेजोल्यूशन.
Yeah.
तो हम शुरू से कैसे सिखा सकते हैं, क्योंकि कॉन्फ्लिक्ट तो मैरिज में आएगा ही आएगा. ठीक है.
Uh-huh.
देसी मैरिजेस में तो हम कहते हैं ना कि फैमिली सिस्टम की वजह से आ रहा है,
Mm,
तुम्हारी माँ की वजह से आ रहा है, तुम्हारी बहन की वजह से आ रहा है.
mm,
ठीक है.
mm.
लेकिन बाहर भी आता है, राइट. आई वर्क विद मेनी कपल्स
Uh-huh.
इन द यूएस आल्सो. तो वहां पे भी कॉन्फ्लिक्ट तो वहां पे भी
Yep.
आता है. So what are the effective ways that we can actually prepare ourselves for a conflict resolution before we get married?
Mm. Okay. I think the first thing is a bit of a perspective change on conflict, which is that we presume that conflict is bad, whereas conflict will always exist.
Good
Conflict
point.
exists even
Good
within
point.
us. I mean, मैं सुबह अपने बारे में जैसा फील कर रहा था, इस वक्त रात को मैं I may not be feeling the same. In the morning I
Hmm.
want to be someone else, in the evening I might have the opposite view of that. So I mean, conflict can exist even within a person, so it is meant to exist between two different people. You
That's
fight with
true.
your own identical twin. You might be different from them, you're different from your sibling, you're different from your own mother, father. So here you are, you're married to someone who is not from even your identical twin pair, so you and them are meant to be in conflict. So I think that the first thing is that people assume that the moment there are differences, people feel threatened by that. So I mean, the first thing we're trying to do is mild that down, that okay, well, two people are different, then
Hmm.
what's the big deal?
Then
No one
what?
needs to be similar.
Exactly.
हमारा वो भी तो एक सेंस है ना कि कि आपने अपनी
हाँ,
फैमिली की तरह ही होना है.
exactly.
आपका बाप अगर बिजनेस करता है, आपने भी बिजनेस करना है.
Exactly.
आपका भाई बड़ा
नहीं नहीं,
अच्छा
नॉट जस्ट
स्पोर्ट्समैन है,
दैट,
आपने भी
नॉट
करना
जस्ट
है.
दैट,
या
कि अगर मेरा
या
बाप जो है वो इंटेलेक्चुअल है एंड आई एम
हाँ
मैरिड इनटू इंजीनियर्स,
या
सो आई एम
या
लाइक यू नो,
या
आई एम मैरिड इनटू अ बिजनेस
So
फैमिली,
we are
राइट?
trying to first normalize differences. That differences will
आर
exist
ओके.
between human
यस.
beings. There will always be a sense of difference, whether we acknowledge that or not. And then how do we work with that? And then developing some ways to work with that. And there is a wide variety of things that can be done, including some differences between people will be irreconcilable. There's no point in
Right.
fighting those. So, for
Right.
example, a
And
lot of
also
times,
learning from difference, Umar. I
of
mean, I
course,
think there's a lot to learn in difference
yeah.
also.
Yeah.
You know,
So I
the
mean,
differences that are
people a lot of times
irreconcilable.
might start from the most difficult things first. That
हाँ.
if there are gridlock problems जिन पे आपका agreement नहीं हो सकता, then my idea of that at least is that we walk around that, that let's continue to work on the relationship. The bigger the container becomes, then you put the same conflict into it, somehow it just changes its form. Whereas अगर एक
Hmm.
relationship ही बहुत limited सा है, बहुत कम एक दूसरे के साथ
Exactly.
understanding है, और उसके अंदर आप already बहुत complicated problems डाल दोगे, then they're
Right.
probably not going to be resolved easily. Instead, if we
Yeah.
continue to expand how we know each other, and at least wherever, look, or I think between two people there will always be some things that they can get along with. कुछ तो
That's right.
दूसरे बंदे में कुछ तो
कुछ
goodness
ओवरलैप
होती
होगा,
है,
हाँ,
कुछ
बिल्कुल
तो overlap
बिल्कुल.
होता है. So I
हाँ
mean,
हाँ.
especially when two people are not getting along, maybe an idea is to first start with what is going okay for them. Where can
Yeah.
they agree with? What are some points of them coming together? And then
Yeah.
continue to expand that till we can reintroduce the conflict, and then try to wonder about it, that can something new emerge from this.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I think that's a really good point, and some of our audience is also agreeing with that. Umar, another thing, उससे मुझे ख्याल है कि ये जो आप
Mhm.
expand करने की बात कर रहे थे ना, गॉटमैन एक researcher है,
Yeah.
जो कि मैरिज और मैरिड कपल्स को ओवर 15-20 साल ऑब्जर्व करता है कि शादी हुई, शादी के पाँच
Mhm.
साल बाद क्या कॉन्फ्लिक्ट हुए, 10 साल बाद, 12 साल बाद. तो उसका एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट है जो कई दफा मुझे बहुत अच्छा लगता है
Mhm.
कि जो जिस मैरिज में कॉन्फ्लिक्ट ज्यादा होता है ना, उसमें जब वो कैमरे से ऑब्जर्व करते थे उनको सुबह
Mhm.
से लेके शाम तक, तो वो देखते थे कि वहां पे अच्छी चीजें रजिस्टर कम होती हैं,
Mhm. Mhm.
राइट? अच्छी चीजें होती हैं,
Mhm.
रजिस्टर दिमाग नहीं करता, क्योंकि
Uh-huh.
दिमाग की हमारी जो टेंडेंसी होती है वो हमेशा होती है अपने आप को डिफेंड करने की, कि वो
Yeah.
गलत जो
Mhm.
चीज सही नहीं होती वो पिक करता है करेक्टिव
Yeah.
पर्पसेस के लिए, राइट?
Yeah.
सो उसने ये डिड्यूस किया कि जिस जिस मैरिज में कॉन्फ्लिक्ट ज्यादा होता है उसमें जो अच्छी चीजें होती हैं वो बहुत नजरअंदाज हो
Yeah.
जाती हैं, टू द पॉइंट कि 80% चीजें,
Mhm.
80% चीजें जो
Mhm.
दिन में अच्छी हो रही होती हैं, जैसे आपने
Mhm.
स्माइल किया एक दूसरे को देख के,
Mhm.
या साथ बैठ के खाना खाया, या
Mhm.
कोई जॉइंट किसी जोक के ऊपर आप हंसे, वो
Mhm.
सब साइडलाइन हो रहा होता है. और जब
Mhm.
क्योंकि कॉन्फ्लिक्ट जब होता है तो वो बाकी सारी लो हो जाती है, उसको दिमाग रजिस्टर नहीं करता. सो आई थिंक वो जो आपका पॉइंट है ना कि एक्सपैंड करें आउटसाइड ऑफ कॉन्फ्लिक्ट चीजों को,
Mhm.
दैट विल रियली देन हेल्प यू कम बैक टू द कॉन्फ्लिक्ट in a more productive and जिसमें से आप कोई हल भी निकाल सकते हैं eventually.
Yeah. 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 And conflict resolution is a process. I think a lot of
I
times we get
agree.
very disappointed that and people step out of the process, which is कि हमारी बन नहीं रही, ये तो कभी सुनेगा नहीं, ये तो अभी कभी करेगा नहीं, ये तो कभी मानेगा नहीं. So people just withdraw. They just sort of either stonewall each other or they withdraw from the conflict instead of that recognition, which is that relationships are a lot of work. I
They are a
think
lot
that
of
is
work.
also a misconception that somewhere people have gathered either through media or the depiction of relationships, which is that the struggle is meant to be to come together, whereas the real struggle is to actually stay
To
together.
stay
And that's a
together,
lot of
that's
work
right.
every day. That if
Every day, that's
relationships
right.
don't work on themselves, they deplete over time. They
Yeah.
attrition, they have lesser commonality, whereas relationships are everyday work. And
Mm.
I think conflict resolution is that process that two people continue to work on it, even if they the best that they can sometimes arrive is to agree to disagree. To say
Hmm.
that, okay,
Hmm.
well, what you're saying, I disagree with that. How you look at the world, I disagree with that, but I'm still going to work with you. And then
Hmm.
I think I think that that's such a firm understanding that when I work with people with the most gridlock problems, I mean, honestly, very sincerely, I'm saying this, that when I work with the most complex human problems I can ever fathom, where I'm working with someone and I say, I don't think that this sort of a problem can ever be solved. What this person is bringing to the table, I don't think इस तरह की चीज का कुछ भी हो सकता है. In the months and maybe the years I worked with those people, and I'm saying years, where the conflict is not resolved, I'm still under that understanding, which is that ये तो नहीं solve हो सकता, ये जो जिस चीज की ये बात कर रहे हैं. We talk about the same thing month after month, maybe year after year, and somewhere something changes, and it just changes. So
Hmm.
that's called the paradoxical theory of change, that says that change happens when you stop trying to make it happen. But that doesn't mean
Hmm.
that you withdraw from the process. It means that you
Hmm.
stay in the process, you stay with it, you continue to work on it, and somewhere things shift. We don't entirely
Hmm.
understand how they shift. Maybe some extra factors get added on, something changes, but
Hmm. Hmm.
that's
But
also
Umar,
when the
staying
change
with that
happens.
process is very difficult,
Oh,
right?
of course, yes.
And I think usme there's something needs to be said about self-regulation and self-care. कि अगर इतना conflict है marriage में and you're committed to
Yeah.
work on those things, so कहीं पे आपको अपनी regulation और अपनी self care की तरफ ध्यान देना है क्योंकि वरना
Mhm.
तो when conflict gets to you ना वो erode
Yeah,
करना शुरू कर देते हैं आपको
of
अंदर से.
course. Yeah.
So I think that's really important to also understand कि ये facet अगर if you are in a lot of conflict and you're
Hmm.
not able to understand your partner and you're committed enough
Hmm.
to stay at it and work through it, you should also be able to help yourself regulate in the process.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that conflict has that negative connotation, whereas conflict just
Uh,
means that something is being threatened. I am saying right and
yeah.
another person is saying left.
Huh.
I'd imagine, let's say we're going on the motorway and there are all sorts of signs. It's
Hmm.
just about one person saying, I want to turn towards here, and the other person is saying, well, I want to turn towards the other way. And we're just recognizing that these are differences. And maybe
And it's
in,
okay.
instead of recognizing that इसका मतलब है कि हम एक कार में जा ही नहीं सकते, it just means that maybe we need to stop somewhere for long enough to actually just understand the other person. And there
Yeah.
can be lots of solutions that can be possible there, including, well, this time we go your way, next time I go my way, or we sit in this car till we can maybe figure it out, or maybe let's continue to drive along a straight direction
Hmm.
and eventually let's see where we are, or another hundreds of other ways that this can be seen. But it becomes very quickly that sense of us and them, and I think between
बहुत
genders,
जल्दी वो जो pitting
yeah,
against each other होते हैं
yeah.
ना वो बहुत जल्दी हो
And
जाते
I
हैं
think that's a
that's
very
your enemy.
unfortunate thing that
Hmm.
happens, that men and women, they can very quickly become enemies, and then they can be very
Hmm.
gridlocked into that hating, which is that for people, whether it's in a marriage or in a friendship or any other way, we as human beings, if there was one thing we know, need each other to survive. We
Hmm.
cannot be without each other. So if we
Hmm.
have to be with each other, then it's about the deeper recognition that, okay, let's figure out ways to be with each other. And conflict is inevitably going to happen, and that's because we are different. And while we're
Hmm.
different, can we find some ways to still be with each other?
एग्जैक्टली एग्जैक्टली एक मैरिज थेरेपिस्ट की बुक है ना स्लीपिंग विद योर एनिमी
Mm-hmm,
बेसिकली वो इसी
mm-hmm,
कॉन्फ्लिक्ट के ऊपर है कि इतना जो एनिमी की तरह पिट अगेंस्ट ईच अदर हो जाते हैं,
Mm.
और उसको रिजॉल्व करने के क्या तरीके, फॉर बिकॉज आप सारी जिंदगी अदरवाइज यूर जस्ट स्लीपिंग विद योर एनिमी, एंड जस्ट
Yeah.
इमेजिन व्हाट हैपेंस टू योर बॉडी व्हेन यू आर इन दैट स्टेट,
Uh-huh.
यू नो, कि
Mhm.
आप सो भी रहे हैं तो आप सेफ्टी
Mm.
महसूस करें बिकॉज यू आर
Yeah.
सेफली स्लीपिंग
Yeah.
विद योर एनिमी,
Yeah.
right? So good points. All right, we have kind of run out of time, but this is an endless discussion because it is so relevant and it happens every
Yeah.
day. So I will really encourage the audience to actually think about this and post questions so we can continue having these discussion. And Tanya, we really missed you today. I'm so sorry. मेरे जितने सवाल आपके लिए थे वो रह गए. I really wanted to hear more from you. So next time, let's regroup in a couple of months and talk about the audience feedback, and let's take this conversation forward.
Okay.
Thank you so
All right.
much, Omar, for joining
Thank
us,
you,
and
Mariam.
thank you,
Of course.
Tanya, for all the time you dedicated to putting this together and offering your support. You're coming back. Yay! Thank you so much. You were such a great support for making this conversation happen, and we really, really missed you today. I actually really wanted to talk to you. Umar was also looking forward to your feedback. So hopefully we'll regroup in a few weeks to a few months and have this conversation further. Take care,
Okay.
guys.
All
Take
right. Okay.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Can you hear me now, by the way?
Yeah. I can hear you.